The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Vince Russo's Shoot to Thrill. This is the second episode of the show. The first one was a two-parter with Bill DeMott. Now, this is a little different, and I'll tell you why. I've known Bill DeMott, since 1999, about 15 years, so I had a pretty good relationship with him. The person I'm about to speak to, now, we just became friends. We just became acquaintances. He had me on his podcast probably about 6 months ago, and I will add, he does have the number one podcast on Podcast One in the country. So, we're still like going through that getting to know each other, boyfriend, girlfriend stage. But the cool thing about him was, I did a show about 6 months ago. He sought me out. He's a huge wrestling fan. Now he's nice enough to return the favor and do my show. And listen, I think very highly of that because this man in a field is a legend. He's an absolute legend. I'm talking about the UFC commentator, man of the world, Chael Sonnen. Chael, are you there?
I'm pumped to be here, buddy. I wouldn't miss it. What's going on? And I love that studio in the background, by the way, Vince. You got some good memories coming to mind, just standing there looking, everything from Batman to Rocky. I even see the Duke in the corner pocket.
Now, Chael, I got to tell you something. I think you just set me up by mentioning Batman, and I'm going to tell you why.
Let's hear it.
Now, Chael, I'm going to be totally honest with you. Before we did our first interview, I was not that familiar with you because, I'm not a UFC guy. Listen, bro, I like the fake fighting, the play fighting where we wear costumes and we really don't hurt each other. I'm not even going to look into a cage, let alone step in a cage with somebody. Can you understand that?
I get it completely. First off, you never have to be totally honest with me because that takes all the fun out of everything. But I did know that. And Vince, you know what? You're not the only one. It's really interesting. Fighters, we love wrestling. We all follow wrestling. We all talk wrestling. The wrestlers, it doesn't go for them. They don't follow the fight game. Very few of them do. The more wrestlers I meet and I go up and I say hello and tell them I appreciate their work, I've got to introduce myself and start from square one. Man, when you're in that wrestling world, it is absolutely eat, sleep, and breathe wrestling. And we don't deal with that in MMA. We do 3 fights a year. And you guys are on the road 253 days a year. So it's a little bit different scenario.
Yeah, what we call that, Chael, is the wrestling bubble. Everybody lives in the wrestling bubble. They don't live outside in the real world.
Sure. You're right.
Now, listen, with that being said, and I want you to entertain me here for a couple of minutes because I know you're probably going to be in denial, but I've uncovered something here. And I want to share this with you to see, I don't know, if maybe I can blow the lid off of something. Now, Chael, we have to combine my, wild imagination. I had to have a wild imagination to be a writer in wrestling for over 20 years. You got to combine that with my love of Batman. And I'm talking about Batman 1966, Adam West, not Christian Bale. I'm talking about the real Batman.
Sure.
So now, Chael, in getting to know you and in doing my research, I got to tell you, I'm going through bios. I'm listening to Joe Rogan interviews. I'm doing everything I possibly can. And I got to tell you, Chael, and I'm not pulling your leg, as I read through this bio and everything you've done in your life and accomplished at the age you're at now, honestly, this looks like you might be like a superhero. You may be like Chael Sonnen by day, but at night, I think you literally may be going out and fighting crime. I'm reading about, we got a sociology degree. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're going to become a Republican candidate, in Oregon. Then we have the high school and collegiate, standout wrestler. Then by 19, we're going to UFC. We're killing people. We're creating all kinds of controversy in UFC. And it just goes on and on and on. this reads like a resume of a man who may have a secret identity.
Well, when you're going through the resume, Vince, add sucker for a compliment to it, and that'll about describe it. But I will tell you, I have a lot of interests, and I've been very fortunate, and I haven't got to live all my dreams. I've still got goals and dreams and things that I fantasize about doing at night, but you've only got so much time in the day. And one thing that I did have an opportunity to do was I got to live a lot of them. I got to go out and a lot of things that I wanted to do or try or become, I did give it a shot at. And you're right. As I look back, I do look back with some very fond memories and very few regrets, which is nice.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, Chael, and this is the God honest truth, and I'm shooting straight with you. I'm new to the podcast game. I've been doing it for about 10 months now. I had the opportunity. I did JR's podcast. I did Austin's podcast. I did Piper's podcast, and then you invited me on your podcast, and like I said, I had to become familiar with you a little bit because I'm not a UFC guy, but I have to tell you, when I hung up the phone with you, I said to myself, this guy's a great podcaster, as a guy that's made an entertainment, a living in entertainment. And I know, you've been a color guy and, for UFC and Fox, and I think you're doing ESPN now. But my gosh, you had such a gift for podcasting. It was one of the best interviews I'd ever been a part of.
That's nice of you to say. Podcasting is so fun. I love the way that you're doing it right here with a video. This is where I would like to get myself. Most of the real entertainment is not only coming over the internet now, which I was a little late to that party. I'm a TV guy, right? I sit down, I push the remote control. If you're not on TV, I'm usually not going to see you. Well, I'm behind on that. What the people are going to now for visual entertainment is the internet. So I think you're ahead of the curve on this. And I think that's where I'd like to get my own show to go as well, is to get a studio like you've got and just put the thing on camera. But boy, podcasts are fun. You set up your own guests. So now you're only talking to people that you want to talk to, that you find interesting. That's how I came across you. I mean, I'd known who Vince Russo was since I was in college, but being able to get a hold of you, I had no idea how to do it. And I had a guy on Twitter, David Joseph, that would always suggest to me, get Vince Russo on. And I'd write it back and say, man, I'd love to, but I don't know how. And he goes, stand by, I'm going to track him down. Well, the world has become such a small place because of social media, and it's so fun. And all of a sudden you get to talk to your heroes. You get to talk to the guys, that you grew up on. And I was able to track down your cell phone. I was too scared to call it, Vince, because I thought he's going to think I'm so annoying if I have his private cell phone. So I just sheepishly sent you a text message, and boom, right? You wrote back, and all of a sudden I had John, and I had a great show of it. Now, if you want ratings, you don't need me to tell you this, but I'm going to anyway. You want ratings on your show, it needs to be Vince Russo sitting over there on that side. On this side of the desk, Jim Cornette.
Hey, I got to tell you
that's the guy that's going to make this whole thing blow up.
Chael, you want to know the truth about that? I have offered that on many, many occasions. As a matter of fact, JR had me on his show, and I suggested to JR, bring Jim Cornette on your show with me. Let's get this over once and for all. I've extended the olive branch. I've given him the invitation, but you will appreciate this and understand this better than anybody. I have become a part of Jim's shtick. So Jim makes a career out of, trashing Vince Russo and telling Vince Russo stories and telling people how much he hates Vince Russo, that at this point, if he makes up with me, or if we make amends, or if we become friends for whatever reason, it's going to hurt Jim in the pocketbook. So he refuses to do that with me. I would do that. I would let you be the moderator. I'd love to do that tomorrow.
That's very interesting. I had never thought about that. I suppose you're right. You are now part of the angle. But yeah. I'll tell you, I don't know if you go and watch that or if that makes you mad, but it is damn entertaining. I find Jim to be very entertaining as it is. I find you very entertaining as it is. But when you get Jim going off on Vince Russo, I mean, it's hilarious. You can insert anybody. It doesn't need to be Vince Russo. Take the great line that Jim's putting out there and insert anybody. I'll use it building up to fight promotion and just substitute the name. He gives a good shoot interview. There's no way around that.
Well, Chael, talking about shoot interviews, we were offered money to do it. Money. Good money. And I said, absolutely, without a doubt, I'm in. Cornette turned down the money.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I was like, well, bro, but yeah. So, hey, if you could set that up, I'm in.
Believe me, I will try. I mean, if I could moderate that, yeah, you're right. I mean, I would do it for selfish reasons, let alone entertainment reasons. But that is the one. That's the spot everybody wants to see. So that's interesting. I'm going to send him a text message at least. I'm going to at least let him know that Vince Russo has accepted. Where are you at, Jim?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't need to tell you. I mean, in wrestling, nobody turns down money. I mean,
Sure.
no wrestler turns down a payday. He turned down a payday to do it.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I will attempt to get to the bottom of this.
And listen, I want to start. I got a bunch of things I want to ask you here. And there's one real interesting conversation I want to get into, because Chael, what I love about you is I've been in wrestling for 23 years. You can't talk to these guys about steroids, because to this day, like they'll still deny that they ever took them. The majority of the guys, some guys will come clean. Some guys will say, yeah, I did it. But the majority of the guys. So I have so many questions that I've never been able to get answered, and a few things I want to talk to you about. But before we get into that, I got to ask you this question that jumped out on me off the bat.
Sure.
Your collegiate career and growing up, you wrestled in your home state of Oregon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I know. Now, Chael, I have to ask you this. You are, bro, you're an attractive guy. I mean, not for anything. I'm not that way, but hey, listen, you're an attractive man. Not
that there's anything wrong with that.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Of course not.
You definitely got a face for TV. Now, I would have to think, growing up, now you're a world-class wrestler in high school. You go to Oregon in college. I have to believe, bro, you're a ladies' man and quite the catch in your younger days. Would that be truthful?
You know what? I would love to say that it was, because that would be a cool thing. But I was in practice my whole life. I never got to go to a party. I was never even invited to them. Every day I was at practice, including Friday night. Saturday mornings, I was up early in a car with my dad. We'd be driving somewhere across the state or somewhere in the Northwest. Even if we had to leave the state to enter a wrestling tournament, we'd come home, we'd be tired, and then we had chores on Sunday. So I didn't have very many friends and even fewer female friends. So I don't know. I would like to rewrite history and say that that's accurate, but most of my time was spent either in a car, a practice room, or doing chores in a barn.
Well, because the reason I was asking you this, and my daughter kind of went through this, and this is why I'm interested in this. Now, you went from Oregon, and then you went to BYU, correct?
Just the opposite. Well, I grew up in Oregon. I went to BYU for college. They dropped their wrestling program, and then I transferred to the University of Oregon. So, yes.
Okay, now, are you a Mormon?
I'm not, and that was a little bit of my hang-up out there. I'm a Catholic.
Yeah. That's what I want to ask you, because the same thing happened to my daughter followed a friend to BYU, and I tried to explain to her, listen, it's a different world. I don't think you're going to be able to adjust to that world. And sure enough, one semester and she was back home. So like that was my question for you. What was there, going from growing up in Oregon, wrestling in high school, then going all of a sudden to BYU, which we all know is Mormon country. How did you deal with that?
I was never more annoyed, and I'll tell you why. I was a real square. I didn't go to parties, but I had never tasted alcohol. I didn't use profanities. I mean, whatever you wanted to say, I was just in that box. I was a real square. Well, I thought I would fit in great at BYU. When I got there, they were all like me, Vince. I never realized that I went straight edge as my way of being different. I didn't know that. You see the kid that comes in with the shaved head or the purple hair, he's looking for attention. I didn't know that I was going straight edge as a gimmick. I didn't realize, man, I like the attention that it gets, and that's what makes me stand out. Until I got to BYU, nothing made me want to crack a cold one more than the fact that I knew it would offend them and somehow make me stand out. And I'm not joking about this. It was a major lesson in psychology as well as sociology for myself. I learned a lot about myself, and I was like your daughter, man. One semester, I was out of there and back in Oregon, and I was so glad to be different. I was to be back in Oregon where I was straight edge, but that made me different and special, man. Out there, it was a cookie cutter situation. I just blended in.
Yeah. Now let's get to that. Let's get to that sociology degree for a second. What was there a purpose behind there? Was there a backup plan if the wrestling career didn't work?
Largely sociology, and for anybody that doesn't tell you this, they're just not telling the truth. Sociology, English, communications, political science. Those are the 4 easiest subjects to get a major in. Those are the 4 easiest majors that you can get a degree in at any school that I know of. I mean, you could go out and get an English degree. We speak English here as a country. Now, this is pretty simple. Now, sociology is right in those same lines. It's also not a specialty degree, meaning if you wanted to get into a grad school, if you wanted to go, whether it's for a teaching certificate, which is pretty common for athletes, or like my sister did, who got a sociology degree, she used that just to get into law school. You're not too pinned down with anything in sociology. I personally found it very interesting. However, I got into it by asking around and saying, what is the easiest degree on campus? And that's what everybody said.
And I did. I'll be honest with you, I did the same thing with communications. And
I said communications.
I know you did. I did the same thing. Now, listen. Here's what's fascinating to me. This is why, I love athletes. I mean, Kurt Angle, just always comes to mind is just like the premier athlete because, you find with athletes that, they don't just do one thing good. They can do a lot of things good when it comes to athletics. And now here you are, you're a standout, a high school and collegiate wrestler. You have a dream that you want to get into UFC, but now you have to take that skill set and you have to train in boxing and different forms of, hand-to-hand combat. It's not a gimme that you're going to be as good in that area as you were with wrestling. I just don't understand how you could be a great wrestler. And you know what? Maybe it's not maybe. God created you that way. That's who you were going to be. But now all of a sudden, I want to get into this UFC game. I've got to learn these other skills. And you take up boxing, whatever you have to do, and you excel in that as well. Was that transition difficult?
I'll tell you, Vince, it definitely is 2 different sports, MMA and wrestling. And when I came through, I had my first mixed martial arts fight in the 90s. I was still in college. Back in the 90s, it wasn't as refined as it is today. It is clearly 2 different sports right now. If you were to take the Olympic champion in wrestling and throw him into the UFC, he's not going to do well until he prepares. Back in the 90s, that wasn't the case. If you had a real strong suit, such as wrestling in my case, you could walk straight in and have a level of success. So I got in at the right time and was able to transform and transition a little bit easier. But looking back, what you're saying is true, man. These are 2 different sports. I never felt like a 2-sport athlete. I felt like I was just a wrestler, and then I took those skills and kind of operated within the rules. But it's not true anymore. To look at where I am physically today, if I had to fight myself from the 90s, a guy that was just going in there with some passion and trying to figure it out, it wouldn't be a very long fight. So these guys today that are able to do it, I do admire them as well. Our next stars aren't going to be guys that were college studs in anything. They're going to be guys that focused in on MMA, and there's a whole crew of those guys coming up right now that there's gyms all over America and throughout the world that are having kids programs. And these kids are coming straight from schools. Parents are picking them up and driving them to the gym. So they're foregoing any kind of collegiate career because mixed martial arts isn't in the NCAA or these collegiate programs. But they're honing their skills. And within a decade, they're going to be in there fighting each other on pay-per-view. And that's where the sport's headed. It really is its own specific sport now.
Hey, Chael, I have to ask you this question. Were you money driven at all early on, or was it just the absolute love of the sport?
It was the absolute love of the sport. In fact, if I can elaborate on that, in wrestling, your dad's got to pay your way. If we're going to a tournament out of state, someone's got to get you there. And then to enter a wrestling tournament, still to this day, you must pay an entry fee. I go take on 4, 5, 6 guys in one day, and I'd have to pay $25 plus the federation card, which serves as your insurance should anything happen, just to be able to do that. And so did all the other competitors. That's how we paid to get somebody to roll the mats out and sell the hot dogs at the concession stand. So, that's what amateur sports were, and that's what wrestling was. And when I got into MMA, again, this was back in the 90s, there was no money. If you were the world champion, in fact, I'll give you an example. Jens Pulver was the world champion in 2001, and he made $9,000 to show up and $9,000 to win. I'm not scoffing at 18 grand. That's not my message, but I think you can understand that's also not going to be enough to carry a guy through his life, particularly if he has a wife and a family. He's going to have to do something else. That was years ahead of me. I had started years before there was the 9-9. So my point being, there was no money, and it was still a situation where I had my father behind it. And if I was going to fight, we had to leave the state. There was just no opportunities back then. I remember going to California. I went to my dad with this idea, and he had to buy the bus ticket and get me out there and do all that stuff. So there was literally no money. Plus, you had to pay your way to get there.
Your picture froze up. I don't know why. I'm seeing a still photo right now, but I'm hearing you fine, and I'm still seeing it. But I'm not getting the video. But
I'm gonna move this computer. There we go. I think maybe the computer.
There you go, bro. Okay, you came back. Okay, let me ask you this now, because I love the psyche, and I love the mindset, and I love what's going through your mind at this point, because this is defining who you are going to be. Was there ever the thought of getting in the fake wrestling game, or was your love really the competition?
Well, no, I really wanted to do professional wrestling. Back from a very young age, I was a big fan. I can remember in the 6th grade, my buddy Justin and I dressed up. He was Axe, I was Smash. We went as the Demolition. We did a great job too. We won the awards contest for the school that they had, and it was a big thrill. I've still got a picture of that somewhere. Justin has it. I wish I had it here. I could hold it up for you. But we did a good job, man. And being Smash was harder than being Axe, because there was a lot more that went into the face paint. But I loved all that stuff. And when I was coming through college in 1998, I was watching WCW on television, and they did an advertisement for a tryout for the power plant. And there was like a phone number you call. It might have been an 800 number, and I called it. And they sent me a packet, and I filled the packet out, and I sent it back. And before I knew it, that summer, I was in Atlanta, and Sarge was still running the program. Mm-hmm. And the tryout was 3 days, which it was essentially 2.5 days. And I had just been an All-American coming off of a college wrestling season. So my point there is I'm in really, really good shape. I'm in top-level collegiate athlete shape. And I can tell you these 3 days are 3 of the hardest days that I've ever had. And it was straight military Navy SEAL mentality, in that I'm going to tell you to do something, and as soon as you've had enough, just leave. No hard feelings. Well, about 14 guys showed up, and on the second day, only 3 guys showed up. 5 guys made it to the end of the first day, but 2 of them didn't get in the car in the morning to come back. Mm-hmm. On the final day, there was 3 of us, and 1 guy did not get in the car to come back. It was just me and a gentleman from Jamaica, and we both made it, and I accepted the invitation. I lost contact with the gentleman from Jamaica, but I accepted the invitation. It was going to cost me $3,000 and go out there and train, but I wanted to finish college first. And I had just finished my sophomore year, so I had my junior and senior year left. By the time I got done with college, the WCW had shut down. Wow. And I didn't know how to get into the game. I simply didn't know who to contact. Now I've got friends all over wrestling, but I didn't then. I didn't know how to get started. Even here in Portland, we had a major feeder program that was ran by one of the great territorial promoters named Don Owen. Don Owen had passed away, and so even right here in Oregon, it had dried up. I just simply didn't know how to do it.
So would that have been your first choice?
I think UFC would have been my first choice, but I was hoping to combine them. Ken Shamrock came around, somewhere right in that same time frame where he had transferred from fighting into the UFC. I thought that was a really good model, and it was totally different back then. Now, I wouldn't do that now. I would just pick the MMA because it is a real career and it is a full-time thing. But back then, they were holding 5 events a year. In a busy year, they'd have 6 events. Now we have an event every single week. As a matter of fact, last year, Dana White put on 53 shows in a 52-week calendar year. So there was one week last year we held 2 shows in 1 week. You get my point. Now there's plenty of opportunity. But back then, I thought Ken Shamrock's really got this figured out. You go fight 2-3 times a year. You go wrestle every Monday night. I thought that he really was ahead of the curve on that.
Chael, I have to ask you this because I would think, again, going from the collegiate game, 2 guys on a mat, I've seen enough of collegiate wrestling in my life. Going from that, to the octagon, it's 2 completely different things. How did you handle that? I mean, it almost seems to me like, when you're on a mat with a guy, you're in the same weight class. It's very, very technical. You're looking to take down for points. It just seems more of like a one-on-one competition. In a cage, it's a total different, concept to me. You're watching the guy's hands, you get kicked in the head. I mean, it's a total different sport. How did you have to change mentally from being a straight, world-class collegiate wrestler to now being a UFC fighter? How did the psyche have to change?
For me, it was very easy because it was always about finding out who the toughest was. My dad and I used to talk about that when I was a kid. We thought whoever was the Olympic champion in wrestling was the baddest dude in the world. And then we never knew. We also bought into the Sugar Ray Leonard and the Mike Tyson hype that whoever the best boxer was the greatest guy in the world. So I used to wrestle all the time, but then we were really heavy into boxing as well. And in 2000, I had considered trying to make an Olympic team in amateur boxing. Now, I wouldn't have made it, but I'd have been one of the guys. I'd have been a top 5, top 3 guy. But the atmosphere wasn't the same. Again, for boxing, the organization and even how to get an answer from a boxing guy of how do you make an Olympic team. I mean, geez, they go round and around and around. And wrestling, the architecture is very clear. Go to this tournament, you make the Olympic team. So I chose to do wrestling, but when the UFC came around, it disproved my dad and I's theory that it's not about who the best boxer is or who the best wrestler is. The baddest dude in the world is whoever's the UFC champion. So it made this goal and this premise, pretty simplistic to now at least get that question answered. So when I went into that, mentally, it wasn't very difficult. Physically, it was totally different because a wrestling situation is extremely difficult, and that's a 6-minute match. In college, it's a 7-minute match. And that is the longest 7 minutes I could possibly imagine a human going through. Now you get into the UFC, a world title fight is 25 minutes. And not only is a guy trying to score points on you like a wrestling match, he's trying to hurt you. Mm-hmm. So in wrestling, as you get fatigued, you can stall, you can control mat space, just make sure you have more points than the other guy. In a UFC situation, it doesn't matter how much you're ahead on the mythical points. He's coming after you, and you got to be ready to defend yourself. So physically, it was a lot more trying on me than it was mentally.
This is a stupid question.
Ask it. I love stupid questions.
I got to ask a stupid question because, listen, Chael, I could never be that. If I'm flipping through the channels and I come across UFC, I have to change it because I'm afraid. I'm afraid just looking at it. So, I would never have the balls to go anywhere near. Forget about it. So here's my question. Does anybody in the UFC ever go into a bout afraid? And if you are afraid, are you dead before you even set foot in that ring?
Yes, to your first question. Everybody goes in there afraid. Everybody's acting like they're not. Most guys will admit to it and just say, yeah, I have a lot of fear. Some guys still have that playground mentality where that's a sign of weakness. I can't think of too many things more helpful than fear. It's really just a matter of how you react to it. But, from Mike Tyson, George St. Pierre, the biggest names out there, they'll all tell you that they were scared, and you are. There's a fear of an unknown. There's a fear of failure. There's a fear of the pain that's going to ensue. Where do my skills lie compared to this guy? You're constantly second guessing yourself. But eventually, your music's going to have to hit those speakers, and you're going to have to make that walk. And every now and then we still deal with the immature guys that have that playground mentality, that think they need to say that they're not scared. They should be. They are. I don't see anything wrong with admitting it. But almost every time those guys walk out there anyway. We're now being plagued with guys whose fears overriding their ability to go to work. We're having a lot of guys pull out of fights and refuse to show up or claim that they're hurt. None of them are. None of them are hurt. None of them are sick. They're just scared. And that's a normal thing to be, but it's a problem when you put your name on a contract. I'm of the mind you should have thought of that ahead of time. You got to deal with it. And again, when the music hits the speakers, you got to make that walk.
Have you ever been in a fight, during the duration of a fight, where at some point in that fight, you were really concerned about your well-being and how you were going to get out of this? And at that point, what happens? I mean, I guess I'm asking because it's almost like, being a raw animal and now knowing I'm hurt, I'm wounded, this is going to go from bad to worse. How do you protect yourself at that point? Like, what's running through your mind? Just surviving to the bell, or how does that work? I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know really how to articulate it. I know what you're asking me. I know the answer. I don't know that I know how to explain it, but yes, that does happen. Now it gets less through the heat of battle. Those anxieties go away as soon as the match starts and you're actually in the battle. Most of that goes away, and including the pain. There is a pain element to it. You don't feel a lot of it. I apologize. My fax is going off. If I could reach over and smash it, I would.
Okay.
I can't reach it. I think we got one or two rings left. And you're just trying to deal with it, but it is definitely much less once the match starts. No matter how bad you're hurting or how bad the fatigue sets in, it's less once the match goes. Now, when you wake up the next morning and you've cooled off, your body starts to feel all of those aches and pains.
Okay, again, I'm going to listen. I hope you don't mind these stupid questions.
I don't find them stupid. Ask away.
Okay. At any point, like when you're in the ring now and say you're dominating your opponent, okay, is there ever any point of compassion in you as a competitor, or there can be no such thing? It's the kill, going in for the kill, and the slightest bit of compassion might work against you.
As I've gotten older, there is more compassion. As I coach and teach young kids, I teach that you stay on them, tell the bell and beyond, that you do not stop until the referee stops you. Regardless if you hear a whistle or a bell. And I don't actually coach fighting. I just coach wrestlers. We're in a tournament situation where there's 10 or 11 mats going, and I have kids that are constantly stopping because they hear a mat on a different whistle. So it comes from a good place. But I have been in fights where I have looked at the referee and said, I'm not going to hit him anymore. Mm-hmm. There are some very, very bad referees out there. This just happened. This was on television. A guy is out. And the opponent, they're separated. One guy's down, the opponent's on his feet, and the referee doesn't wave the fight off. So the opponent says, and the referee's mic'd up, it's on live television. He turns to the referee and says, he's out. And the referee yells at him, no, he's not, finish him. Well, the term finish him, I have a huge problem with that to start with. That's a barbaric and terrible term that generally only happens in the movies when somebody's getting ready to chop another guy's head off. For a referee to yell it in the heat of battle when one opponent is concerned enough that he's saying, hey, this guy can't take anymore, and a referee yells, finish him. Fortunately, the fighter did not do it. The other athlete was done. Eventually, the referee called it, but they should have replaced that referee immediately. They didn't, ever. Never fined him, sanctioned him, and he worked later that night. And you'll have these referees that it gets bad. It gets really bad right here in modern times, and nobody does anything about it. And there has to be a level of compassion. We're not trying to maim one another. We're trying to damage your opponent enough that he surrenders and you get your hand raised. Well, that on its face is very aggressive. However, that's still the line. And you'll have referees trying to promote something more on the spot. And it's really inappropriate.
Now, what would you do if you were the guy in that spot on top? What would you have done?
Well, I ended up in a spot like this on a small show when I was working my way to the UFC, where I had yelled at the referee during a fight. I'm fighting a guy. We're not in a cage. We're in a boxing ring. So I'm hitting the guy, and the opponent turns his back to me, which I think is a sign of surrender. He does it on the ropes. There's nowhere to go, and there's his back. I mean, take any shot in the world you want. He could never see it coming. So that on its face is a problem. Then, as I'm still attacking, the guy then dips outside the ropes, like an Andy Kaufman versus Jerry Lawler situation. Now, that is leaving there's if that were a cage, Vince, this would be the same as the guy climbing over the cage.
Right.
So now he's halfway out of the ropes, and the referee wants me to continue to hit him. He wants me to reach over the ropes to hit the guy, and I said, I'm out. I'm out. He can have the win. If you want to give him the win, go ahead. I'm not hitting him anymore. And I'm yelling this at the referee in front of all of the fans. So he does. He stops it. So the referee then comes to me in the back and wants to know why I yelled at him, if I was just amped up. That's the word he uses. I'm like, I said he was done. He didn't fight back to start with. It was a terrible mismatch to start with. I knock him down 3 times, you don't think about it. And eventually he crawls outside the ropes with his back to me. And your way of handling it is that he's still conscious. Attack him? Like, you're a terrible referee. I said, no, I wasn't amped up, and I don't apologize. And that was the whole story. But I've been in spots like that before. You know, I've been with referees before, Vince, where referees will come to the rules meeting and then brag about the fact that they don't stop fights. Oh, you definitely want me reffing your fight because I don't stop these things. I don't stop them for anything. I let you guys figure it out. It's like, listen, stupid. The reason we agreed to these rules is largely in part because there is a referee who will bail us out if we need it. Mm-hmm. This isn't a big courage contest where for me to lose, I have to admit to the world that this guy's braver than I am as I lay on a hospital bed for the next week. That's not what we're doing here. This is a sport. It's not a LA gang riot, but we've still got these kinds of referees. It's less and less. But we do have them, and they do appear. And when this appears, absolutely nothing happens. Nothing. No commission does anything. They just move on, collect their 6%, and set up the next show.
Wow. I want to move on to the topic of steroids, because I have a lot of questions for you. And not so much like about what you did, but your stance, and especially some of the comments I saw you made on the Rogan show. But first, Chael, I don't want to get so much into, basically, you failed some tests at UFC. We kind of,
lots of them, not just one, multiple.
Bro, I'm trying to be nice.
No, but don't be, man. I set records. It was like the booby prize, but I'm still the champ.
Okay, now you have to.
I wish I had a performance enhancer for putting in earpieces. If there was something I could shoot in my ass to make this thing stay, and I'd look like Pebble Beach down there right now. Maybe you gotta bear with me.
Maybe you need to go get some Scotch tape. Hey,
you know what? I have some right here. That's a good idea. All right, continue while I find the tape.
I'm going to ask you some questions where I would have never gotten a straight answer from wrestlers, and I know that you are as honest as they come, my friend. First of all, you failed multiple drug tests. From what I'm reading, a lot of it was HGH. But were you always taking it for something specific, Or was it always something different? Was it, to gain strength, to gain the upper hand? Was it for an injury to speed the process of the healing? Was it always for a certain thing, or was it always for different things?
Well, there's a little bit of both of that. Let's start out with this, just so this is perfectly clear. I was guilty. I was not falsely accused, Vince. And one of the things that I always stop myself before I go into talking about this. If I answer any of your questions and I just tell you what happened, I don't want to do that as a way of watering down what I did. I did it. I was guilty. The end. Now, to have a dialogue on it, though, first off, you bring up HGH. HGH is a miracle drug. It's a wonderful thing. It's completely legal. Our DEA, our FDA, law enforcement, everybody says this is a legal medicine. However, it is banned for sport. I think that that's very relevant. You had mentioned steroids a couple of times. I've failed more of these tests than I could shake a stick at. I've never had a drug in my life. I've never even had a drop of alcohol. I've also never taken a steroid, never even been accused of it. But when you fail one of these substance tests, the headline every time is going to read illegal steroids. Mm-hmm. None of the things that you've got in front of you that I was accused of, even some of the stuff I took that they didn't catch me for, that just wasn't in my system on the day they came, none of them were steroids. When I grew up, that was the topic. Don't take steroids. Somewhere over time, they've changed this argument to don't take performance-enhancing drugs. Well, that's a bunch of crap. Performance and enhancing, those are positive words to start with. Mm-hmm. The word drug, they choose to put that in, but if you've got a prescription, now you're talking about medicine. So now we've got three positive words. Performance-enhancing and medicine are all good things. Mm-hmm. I don't apologize for taking any of those, but I also am not begrudging towards the sport. If the sport wants to set up some rules and say that a guy can't do that, that's fine. I think largely we ended up in this spot because of the baseball players. The baseball players found things that helped them to have better lives. It made them feel better, and that all transitioned to the field. When those guys got caught, if they would have just said, yes, as a matter of fact, here's what I took. I discovered this thing called human growth hormone. It made me feel 10 years younger. I discovered, and fill in the blanks. And boy, not only am I having a better life, I'm hitting more home runs now because of it. If they would have done that, all of this would have gone away. Because they lied, because they came out and made it a dirty, filthy lie, now you've got performance-enhancing drug, all which are positive terms, based into the same group as when you and I were growing up that steroids were put into. Mm-hmm. And, these medicines are good and appropriate medicines for appropriate cases. I have a kid in my neighborhood. I graduated high school 3 years behind his father. He takes human growth hormone. He had to start taking it in junior high for health benefits because he wasn't developing correctly. I don't want some person, man, woman, or child in this case, to be ostracized for taking human growth hormone because all you hear on ESPN is how dirty this is and the NFL won't test their players for it. Just because some jerk like me, athlete, comes along to make a boob out of the system doesn't make this medicine and science bad. I think that these tests have got a little ridiculous on the things they're popping for to take an Olympic champion's gold medal away because she has a billionth of a trace of ibuprofen, street name Advil, in her system is ridiculous. However, they're arguing that reducing her inflammation gives her an enhancement. Well, it does. So what? I'm drinking a coffee right now. The relevance to this, Vince, 2 cups of coffee this size in a 15-minute period, they take your license away for up to 4 years because your caffeine levels are off the chart. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's right, but they'll argue that caffeine's a performance enhancer. Well, it is, but stop with all of that. I would never take anything. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I never have and I never would. If I didn't think it would enhance my performance, that's the entire point of taking it. So when you come out and you say you took something to enhance your performance, shame on you. I go, man, I'm looking left, right, and center trying to find things that enhance my performance. Now, they got to be legal. I'm not talking about steroids, but I am saying when the media comes out and wants to drive a nail through somebody because they took a performance in it, well, that's medicine. So did you, media. Every one of you have drank a cup of coffee this morning. That's what runs America. What you didn't know is that's a banned substance. That's a bunch of crap. Every one of you, not 99%, 100% of your listeners today have Advil in their medicine cabinet at home. 100%. What they don't know is that's on the banned list. And if you test positive for coffee or for Advil, the headline's going to read steroid. I have steered into it. Now, everywhere I go, I talk about steroids. The reality is not only have I never taken them, I've never even been accused of it. But I'm smart enough, Vince, to know what the headline says. And I'm smart enough to know I can't go around and educate one person by person. I find it a tremendous conflict. A reasonable person should be able to reasonably conclude if it's a legal substance, it is therefore an allowed substance. On the other hand, a reasonable person should conclude if it's an illegal substance. And make sure people miss the distinction. Illegal, they put you in handcuffs. They throw you in jail. It's against the law. All the things I took, 100% legal. I could take them in front of a police officer right now. He'd keep eating his coffee and donuts. We've got other athletes that are taking Schedule I narcotics. They will put you in prison if they catch you taking them. I lose my license. The guy's taking a Schedule I narcotic, nothing. No fine, no suspension, nothing. So these ban lists are very peculiar. There's also a misconception that you cannot take performance-enhancing drugs. Well, that's not true. There's a number of performance-enhancing drugs that are allowed. There's also substances that do not enhance your performance that are banned. All I have succeeded at in answering your question today for you and everybody else watching is to confuse everybody. Everybody right now is confused, going, man, there's no way what he just said is right. No, what I just said is right, but the reason you got to take it from me and not a member of these agencies that are setting the rules, Vince, are because the agencies setting the rules don't do interviews. They don't come out. We have no ability to question them and gain some kind of insight. We have no ability to question them and say, hey, listen, what do you mean a cup of coffee is banned? That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Maybe they have an answer for it, but I haven't the foggiest idea what it is because we can't get an audience. They just come in and they tell us when somebody's broken a rule.
You know what's so interesting? You know, three out of the last 4 baseball players busted for PEDs, and I'm talking about the last couple of months. 3 out of the last 4 were from the Dominican Republic, where everything that they were taking was legal in the Dominican Republic. So these guys were getting it over there because it was over the counter. It was legal. All of a sudden, they come over here. They fail the test. They're busted. They're banned for 80 games from baseball, and they don't understand what happened because what they were taking was literally legal in the country they just came from.
Sure. And Vince, that's the same problem. You know, when I keep using this as a prop, but it's perfect. 2 cups of coffee this size in a 15-minute period, and your levels will be off the chart. They'll take your license away for 4 years, and the headline will read illegal substance, and everybody will assume steroid. The relevance to that, in America, you, me, your parent, everybody accepts caffeine. If you're a child and you walk into a coffee school and you're drinking coffee and kids are doing it younger and younger, there's no problem. That's not true throughout the world. In some parts of the world, caffeine is a drug, but it's an unacceptable drug in some parts of the world. When you bring in a world anti-doping agency, they have to take that into consideration. So for Americans, we scratch our head and go, you got to be kidding me, coffee and Advil? Well, yeah, in some parts of the world, coffee and Advil. So if you adhere to a world agency, those things are taken into consideration. That's ridiculous. To have a world agency, it's ridiculous to start with. It should be what you and I grew up with. Don't take steroids.
I've got to, there's 2 questions I want to ask out of all this. The first one is, listen, you are a world-class athlete, but yet here you are. Yes, I'm guilty. I did it. This is what I did. This is what I took. I never took steroids, but very, open to it. That's the route you decided to take. I agree with you. Listen, I'm a huge baseball mark. It's my favorite sport. I agree with you. Watching, from Rafael Palmeiro, to everybody, to McGuire being in denial, to A-Rod lying over and over again. To this day, Bonds, never coming clean. Why? you're an athlete. You think like an athlete. You have the mindset of an athlete. What are they afraid of? Whereas if they all stated the same case that you're stating right now, perhaps people would listen and a change would be made. What is it that they're worried about?
Yeah, I get confused on that too. I mean, I'm not a pothead, but the potheads have taken over America. They set out over 20 years ago. They got diplomatic. They got the votes, and now marijuana is legal. Not only legal in our streets, recreationally, both in my bordering state of Washington and the state of Colorado.
I live in Colorado. There's dispensaries, whatever they're called over here. Bro, it's like going to 7-Eleven over here.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I know that it is. But nationwide, even though not each state has allowed it for recreational use, like Colorado, your state, and Washington, which borders Oregon, where I'm at now. But even President Obama just said, look, we're not prosecuted anymore. Now, okay, fine. Sport, including mine, has now allowed for marijuana as well. There's still certain levels you can't exceed, but now they're allowing people to take marijuana. I'm sitting here, I'm scratching my head and I'm going, okay, you're going to allow what we grew up that was an illegal and prisonable drug, fine. But these substances that the DEA and the FDA have already approved years ago still sit on your ban list. And then the potheads also try to make the argument, well, this isn't a performance enhancer. Well, if it's not a performance enhancer, why are you taking it? You can't be both. To be medicine, which you potheads have claimed you are, medicine has to improve performance. If it doesn't, it's malpractice. Mm-hmm. So now something that they're arguing doesn't enhance your performance has become legal, while things that can make you better are illegal. I don't know. I don't understand it, but it's American. If you get the vote, you can do whatever you want. As far as the baseball players go, those guys never should have lied. On day one, they should have said yes, and boy, am I grateful for it. Here's what I'm taking, and here's what it's doing for me. I'm sleeping less. My skin looks better. My attitude with my wife is better. And you know what else? It's even transitioned into the field. I'm even catching more plays, making more runs, and hitting more balls. And everybody go, wow, how do I get some of that? Or an agency would have stepped in and go, well, let's make sure we keep it in the, or whatever would have happened. But as soon as you lie, instantly you just look like you're up to something dirty. They just, John Cena does it now with wrestling. There's nobody out there more vocal about anti-steroid. There's not one guy that's obviously on steroids more, unless you want to bring in Ryback. I just don't even count him as a wrestler. Then John Cena. It's like, man, I've lived this life, and lying about it is part of it. You start pointing fingers in every direction, so they're not pointing at yourself. But at some point, it's like, John, you're wrestling with a shirt off, man. This is obvious. You want to do what Ryback does and throw a singlet on? At least maybe we have to guess. You're out there half naked, and you're looking better now than you did 10 years ago. The human body just doesn't work that way. So shut up, or just tell us all what you're doing, because it doesn't make a damn bit of difference if you body slam a guy or not anyway. It's like the baseball guys. You want to hit a baseball? Who gives a damn?
You know what the interesting thing is now, Chael? I'm telling you, and they're going to have a huge problem on their hands. And, when you look at their history and you look at the last 15 years, it's unbelievable. But, they crack down on the performance-enhancing drugs now. Everybody's clean. The guy gets nailed here and there, but the game has changed dramatically. What was once an offensive game with everybody hitting home runs, when it was Sosa and McGuire, and everybody was talking about that, when it was Clemens, and everybody was talking about Clemens, and baseball was drawing a huge amount of numbers. In the last 15 years, it has deteriorated. It has turned down into a pitches game. A lot of times, teams are scoring 1 or 2 runs. Everybody's striking out. We've lost the excitement of the home run, and the offensive part of the game. This is hurting Major League Baseball. It's going to continue to hurt baseball, because now they've cleaned it up, and now people aren't seeing what they want to see. I'm just curious to see in the years to come how baseball is going to react to that.
Yeah, I'd be curious too. I don't know. And as much as sometimes, Vince, I go on these diatribes and I sound like, I don't at all want to come across as the guy that sounds like, hey, let's go and let everything go. I really don't stand by that. I'm a conservative guy. I'm a Republican by choice. That isn't the belief system, but I do think we need to be clear in a couple things. First off, don't say performance enhancers are banned. We can't do that because that means all of medicine. Mm-hmm. Not all of medicine is banned. We can't. A guy does not need to choose between health and sport. There's a bill right now in the state of California, one of the biggest states in the union, that if parents don't vaccinate their kids, they can be charged with abuse and or neglect. They're saying you must vaccinate your kids. Well, vaccinations, first off, are a steroid. They're not anabolic, and I have no problem with it, but they're a steroid. And second, they're performance enhancers. That's why you vaccinate, to enhance and to make better. Those aren't bad terms. However, there is a very interesting discussion to be had where you're going, okay, one state is saying you must vaccinate, and then when you reach a certain age, you're not allowed to take anything. So, well, we can't say that either. Let's just come up with some very clear rules so everybody knows what's going on. Let guys operate within those confines. Let them feel good. Let them extend their careers. Let them perform, even if it makes you perform better on the baseball field or whatever. Let's support that. Let's just make sure that it's fair play. That used to happen. When you and I were growing up, they did it, and they did it with one word: steroids. They stopped steroids. Now they have changed the dialogue, and it has gotten so silly that, I really don't have a better example than when they took the girls' gold medal away, all-around gymnastics champion. She's 14 years old, and she has a billionth of a trace of ibuprofen in her system, and it's banned, black or white. It's like, yeah, those are the rules, and you have to take that medal. I understand that, but that just shouldn't be the rule. A person that's doing gymnastics and these hard sports, they ought to be able to go home and have an Advil and get a good night's sleep. We shouldn't ostracize them for that. So I think they just need to change the rules a little bit. And this is what the potheads have been so good at. The potheads have gone out and gone, who are we hurting? I don't know if there's an answer to that or not, but that's what they said. They go, who are we hurting? This calms us down. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. We do. And they got the votes and it backed them. Yet an Olympian who gets absolutely no money and lives a life of torture where their nutrition and their exercise and their sleep and their social, everything is completely out of whack, can't take an ibuprofen? Come on.
Yeah. See, the question that comes to my mind, and I don't know the answer to this, but, I do know, with marijuana, which is legal here in Colorado, I know that it does have, effects that can, be harmful to you down the line if you use it on a daily basis, as far as, brain cells and things like that. It does have an adverse effect after years and years and years if you decide to keep using it. I know that for a fact. I guess my question is now, I know because I was around it, Chael, the steroids, these guys were taking these steroids and they would look great at the time and were on top of the world at the time and were being hired by Vince McMahon at the time. But, 20 years down the road, when they're no longer in the ring, they have an enlarged heart. They're dropping dead at, 55 years old. So it took its toll on them. When you talk about performance enhancing drugs, are there drugs of choice that would have an adverse effect on these athletes down the line?
I think that could be, I'm not an expert on that. I think that anytime you bring up health, you start to have really good effectiveness with your argument. I really apologize for this falling out. I know that's got to get annoying to everybody. I have cauliflower ear. To the viewers at home, where you wrestle and your ears get mangled and these darn buds are struggling to get in. Anytime you can bring up health, you seem to gain a lot of traction with people. It's a very silly argument in that, what's the next guy say? The next guy says, well, then don't drive a car because you're far more likely to lose your life driving a car. You're far more likely to be in a plane wreck or hit by a train. And all of a sudden you start trying to guess what's more dangerous as the way to getting out to admit that your argument is dangerous. Yeah, I really don't know how that works. I think that doctors argue about that. And you have to understand, when you're talking about medicines and you talk about use, even HGH, which you brought up, or even steroids, which you and I both seem to say, hey, throw the steroids out. I don't know if either one of us knows enough about it to be weighing in on it. I've just been told it from day one as a kid, so I believe it to be true. I'm the same with marijuana. I was told that from day one is you don't do marijuana. I don't know a damn thing about it. Maybe it is the next cure. I have no idea. But the point is this. You very seldomly do see doctors come out, and I read a lot of stuff on this, and say that HGH or steroids are bad. They will say abuse is bad. Use is good. And in some countries, they'll allow it over the counter. The problem we ran into in America is we know if you're supposed to take 2, 4 is better. And if you're supposed to take 4, then I need 6. And when you run into that abuse, that seems to be where the long-term problems is. And when you bring up the professional wrestler specifically, just on a visual examination, when I look at those guys and the way their bodies were at 18 and 24 and 25, when your body is producing all of these things needed to be a great athlete naturally, and you abuse that and you shut off, whether it's your testes or your pituitary gland, you shut that stuff off, you have long-term effects. Use for use never happens, and it becomes a very fine line. But if you ever listen to doctors, and I do, I listen and read to a lot of that stuff, they all talk about the use of medicine being great, but sending a guy home with it in a bag full of needles lends to abuse.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's dead on. And I mean, and that's been the problem in, wrestling for years and years and years, and it continues to be. Speaking of wrestling, let's get on a little lighter topic here, and then I'll let you go. But there was a lot of grumbling and a lot of rumors and hearsay and this and that you were in some type of talks with the WWE as it pertained to the last WrestleMania and maybe being involved or making an appearance. Was there any truth to that whatsoever?
Yeah, there was, but not to the extent of the reports that I read. When I talked with the WWE, it was purely in a broadcasting role. And I wasn't too excited about going out and being a broadcaster. I still wanted to get in the ring and participate. And that option wasn't out there. There was also a big pay-per-view that was supposed to take place a year ago between a guy named Vanderlei Silva and myself. We had done a reality show down in Brazil that drew crazy numbers. We did 18.1 million a night that we ended up in a street fight on the show. But just to give you a sense for how big this match would have been, and it ended up not happening. There has been talk by wrestling organizations of bringing us in and having us do this match. I thought perhaps that's the direction the WWE was going to go, and I heard that Vanderlei had also been invited to WrestleMania. I never saw him at WrestleMania. I had no contact with that turkey, but when I got there, all they wanted to do was talk about possible broadcasting, which I'm not closed to that idea. I would like to work with Jim Ross in that capacity if I did it, but I'm also not overly. I was a little disappointed. I thought I was going to get in there and be part of the action. I didn't know I was just going to be asked to sit and talk about it.
I got to ask you this, as stupid as this is. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I watched the WWE product today, and I can't watch the WWE product today. I just can't. When a guy like me is used to working with, the Austins and the Rocks and the Mick Foleys and people of that caliber, who they have, a lot of the guys that they have on TV today is, no disrespect, but, they would have been in the ham and egger category. You, no doubt in my mind, could cut a promo better right now than 95% of the people on their roster, and we would believe you, and we would hate you, and more importantly, we would draw money. I hate to say this, but, listen, Vince McMahon isn't stupid, and, I see you. I know what you're about. I know your history. You're a huge freaking draw. You would make money, but, I mean, is the problem that he's looking at your background and the the charges of the steroids, and he doesn't want that associated with him? I can't think of any other reason why that company would not hire you as a wrestler.
Yeah, that could be what you just said. That could be it right there. I haven't been told that. They had made me an offer years ago, just before I fought Anderson Silva the very first time. And there was a lot that went with the offer. And I've talked about it publicly a little bit. I've never said what all they needed me to do, but I turned the offer down, and when it got back to them, they flat out denied that they had ever given the offer. So fair enough. What's the difference? But even then, and that would take us back. I was 33 years old. I'm 38 now. Even then, they were a little bit apprehensive because of the age. They really wanted guys coming in that were anywhere from 22 to 24 years old. 22 if you hadn't gone to high school or college, rather, and somewhere right around 24 if you had. And why they made that distinction, I don't know, but I'm just recalling a conversation that I had. And so I don't really know what it is they look for. I know the guys that drew WrestleMania weren't their younger guys. I think Roman Reigns is a huge talent. There personally, the pop that they got in comparison to what The Rock got wasn't the same. What The Rock got as opposed to what the NWO got when their music hit wasn't the same. It was those older guys that really do draw. They've got a legend status in that business that certainly don't pertain to. But I do, as a shareholder of the company, disagree a little bit with the assessment that the world belongs to those 24-year-olds and 25-year-olds as it pertains to professional wrestling. It seems to me, it seems to the other shareholders, as I watch the stock tumble daily, that just isn't true, man. The more times we can get Sting in there, the better. And I personally don't get Sting now, but seems to draw. And guys from around age do really well. So I think maybe they need to reconsider a little bit of that. Shelf life is important too, and those are the expert. I'm not questioning them. I do own a lot of stock in that company, and my opinion doesn't matter.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think, listen to me, Shamrock wasn't too far removed from how old you are right now. I'd have to guess, when Shamrock was in the WWE, because I was there and I loved working with the guy and I thought he was tremendous. I'd have to guess, bro, at youngest, he was maybe 34, 35, 36 at the time. And he got over huge. So the transition, it's proved that you can make the transition. And Chael, here's the thing. He couldn't cut a promo. And Ken will be the first one to tell you that. But his intensity, was what was really, got him over. And he had intensity like nobody. But, you being able to go in there, do what you do and back it up and talk. I mean, to me, it's like it's just a no-brainer. But They do a lot of things today that I just I don't understand. I really wish, man. I wish somebody would come along who had the money, who had the balls, who had the know-how, and to really, start a promotion and reinvent the business, because that's what's not happening. Rather than reinvent the business and go forward, the wrestling business has gone backwards and it needs to evolve. It hasn't, and that's why it's just become very stale right now, and they have to keep going back to the well to sell out WrestleMania to Taker and guys like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I completely agree with that.
Well, listen, Chael, I want to listen. Let me ask this last question and we'll wrap it up. I know now, you're doing your podcast now. Now, are you doing work for ESPN now as well?
Yeah, I'm full-time employee at ESPN now. Their commitment to MMA has grown significantly. With that said, we get really greedy as MMA fans. We want more. But it's grown. As a matter of fact, I catch a plane out tomorrow morning, and we'll go back to Bristol, Connecticut to cover the UFC for this weekend. Demetrius Johnson will be defending his title. Allegedly, Rampage Jack is back on the card. There was a big court dispute keeping him off, and now I'm reading that he's got the green light and is fighting. So we'll see how that all develops. But yeah, man, I'm with ESPN and doing the podcast and enjoying visiting with you, most importantly. I'm going to ask you this, and this is the last question. Is the next big thing somewhere in that brain of yours? I think that would be a fair statement.
It is.
I think that would be a fair statement.
Yeah, because I'm so impressed by the things you've done at your age. It amazes me. And, like I said, bro, the first, as a podcaster, you're the best interview that anybody has ever interviewed me. Now you're going to go to ESPN, you're going to steal the show. It just seems that you have that Midas touch, bro, that anything you touch turns into gold, I'm really looking forward to seeing what that next big thing is. And Chael, I want to thank you so much for returning the favor. Listen, I've had wrestlers like whose podcast I've done, and the arrangement was I do yours and you do mine, and after I done theirs, I can't get them on the phone anymore. So for you to do this for me, I really, really appreciate it, my friend.
But I wouldn't miss it. I'm a huge fan. I love your work. I know this thing's going to blow up. Anytime you need me, I am here.
Well, I really, really appreciate it. Everybody, that's Chael Sonnen, everybody. Podcast One, ESPN. He's doing the UFC work. I want to thank him. I want to thank everybody for listening, and we will be back for Shoot to Thrill right here next week. Take care, everybody.
The preceding presentation was brought to you by the Realm Network.